Right. So we'll just start with you, Tracy, if you wouldn't mind, just what your background is and why you're here today.
Yeah, absolutely, Tim. And so I'm a Deputy Chief Finance Officer for a clinical commissioning group over in East Riding, a Hull for colleagues. I don't know where other people are in the geography. So my role, my sort of substantive role is very much dealing with the money aspects of purchasing healthcare services. That's all about to go through a substantial world of change, as with all things public sector. They like to rejiggle those deck chairs, and we're going back probably to a model that was in place maybe 10, 15 years ago. That's they're rebadging it, they're calling it an integrated care system, but it's very much what strategic health authorities used to look like in the past, and it's bringing together the budget and population information at a much larger scale, sort of circa 3 million sort of population is where they tend to pitch it at, bringing all that allocation together. And so what that means really, and why I'm on this call, is we're about to go through very, very big organisational change. And whilst I've managed to spend the majority of my career, sort of 15, 16 years in the NHS now, and this is the first one I've been directly impacted on in terms of moving the deck chairs. I've always escaped by sort of moving to an organisation that didn't go through the change. So I've got quite a big team to be taken through. There's a post coming up actually that will be the sort of director responsible for implementing the transition for the CCGs that I'm hoping to secure. So I will also, no pressure, Tim, could do with a bit of a refresher, ready for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, it's big change in a way that I've never experienced at this level directly.
Okay. And I take it that given it's the CCGs, it's a national change. This is happening right across the country, correct?
It is, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. All right, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind just doing a short intro for us.
Yes, because I don't like speaking. I work, Kira here is one of my colleagues. I'm in the finance department. I'm the financial accountant for Silmid. It's a company that's been growing for the last 40 years. And although we have had COVID, we have actually managed to really keep going, and our sales have not dipped much considering we're in aviation. But as ever, there's always changes, and there's always different ways to actually deal with change. And to actually speak to you, Tim, is just wonderful again.
Yeah, that's the real reason, isn't it, Lynn?
It is. Yeah,
I can understand that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so just for your benefit, Tracy, these the Lynn and Kira have been subjected to my training for some time now, so they probably know me better than most people. I would probably say. Okay, great.
I'm just going to say, Tim, I'm on the fence about speaking to you, just so you know.
Yeah,
I'm all right about it.
Yeah, that's why I've only got 4 people on the call, Tracy, rather than 40. Okay, fabulous. Okay, Kira, if you wouldn't mind just doing an intro for us.
Yeah, of course. So as Lynn said, we work with each other at Silmid Limited. So we are very much that route to market for our manufacturers and that route of supply for end users. So that mostly is in MRO, so maintenance, repair and overhaul within the aviation industry. I've been with the team for 10 years this year, which seems ridiculous. 10 years, that's like... definitely part of the furniture now, I think. But yeah, I mean, I've really joined in this call because I think it's something that our operations director has always said, and it's that, you know, if anything's inevitable, it's always change. So I think it's always good to kind of touch base with that, some of the techniques in how we can help some of our employees through that. And I'm also purchasing manager. Sorry, I didn't mention that, what I actually do. So I'm responsible for managing the stock and all of the purchases within Silmid. So everything that we supply we're very much that on-demand business, so having that right inventory at the right time, the right price is so crucial. And I manage that with my 2 buyers as well. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thanks, Kira. Sarah, if you would mind just doing a short intro for us as well.
Just unmute myself. Yes. Hi, I've been working with Tim for a couple of years or so now. The area that I mostly am involved in is client relationships, so building relationships and obviously helping to grow our sort of outreach. So a lot of listening, a lot of sort of helping to put ideas together, and just generally sort of keeping in touch. So that is my role.
So what that translates to is she's the one that smooths off all my rough edges and makes me sound professional and charming. Okay, brilliant. Now, Lynn, if you think you were scared about getting on video, Sarah's on a whole nother level, I have to tell you. It's audio only 100% of the time. I think I've only ever seen her face like twice. Okay, brilliant. All right, I'm just going to share my screen, so just please let me know if you can see that. Okay.
Yep,
Everyone
I can see
see
that.
Yeah,
okay.
I can see that.
Yep.
If you press escape, that should help the gallery sit nicely against the slide, if that helps.
Tim, I'm just going to try and swap over. I might have found a way to get on via my
Okay.
laptop. So if you've got 2 of me, I'm sorry, I'll be quick.
That's all right. Bump the numbers up, Tracy. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so we'll just give Tracy 1 moment. Lynn and Sarah and Kira, can you see the slides okay?
Yeah, I can see that clearly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that fine.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Brilliant. Great. All right. Well, I might get cracking. Just okay. Here we go. Okay, right. All right. So the session today is on driving and managing change, as you already know. In the case of Lynn and Kira, you guys, we touched on this a little bit in some of the sessions, but never really went into it with a great amount of depth. So, what the intention for the session today is to provide a bit more background on driving and managing change. I will be covering off 5 models. Some of them you may have seen before, and I want to look at specifically where their focus is it more on employees and or business, or a combination of the both. So in your case, Tracy, you probably thinking more of this from an employee point of view, because to some degree the strategy side of the change has already taken place across the business. Then your role is to then implement it. But we will be touching on both throughout the session. I take it all of you've used Zoom before. I like, especially in the case of Kira and Lynn, you'll know that I tend to prefer interaction over transfer of information. So given the size of the group, should lend it well to get you guys engaged as much as possible. We're doing that through using some of the annotation tools. Just let us know if you've used annotation tools before on Zoom.
No,
I've never
I've
been
not.
on Zoom before.
Right, okay, in which case I'll just do it quick, because you guys use Teams, don't you, primarily?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so you've got your chat function, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. So at times I will be asking you to do, so just type in the chat function. Primarily we'll be using audio anyway. At the top of your screen, you'll see a button called View Options.
Yeah.
If you click on that and scroll down, you'll see an annotation button down. So yeah, so it looks a little bit like this, where you can text, and I mean, they're mostly all the same. A lot of these applications, but you'll see that as well. So we'll be using that in a moment, actually, the annotation tool. So it'll be audio, chat function, a little bit of annotation, and that's what we'll be using today. And of course, you can use the reactions button down in the bottom right-hand corner. So if you're something that you like, dislike, and if you can use those as well. Everybody okay with that? Maybe just give us a thumbs up so I know that everybody's comfortable with that. Nice,
Yeah,
Sarah, Lynn, brilliant. Okay, Tracy, you're okay with that? I can see you've now signed in on that, which is great. Kira, you're okay with that? Found the thumbs up? So go down through reactions.
Hang on, I've not got it. One sec. Yeah. Come on.
There it is.
Ta-da.
Okay. Well done. Okay, so I won't be able to do slides 28 and 29 now because we lost a bit of time whilst Kira was finding the thumbs up button. So I'll just have to slice it off at the end. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to start off with a very simple question, and I'll get you to use the annotation tool. So you can go up to the top, view options, click on the annotation tool, click on the T button for text, type in your text, and then click away from the screen. So I want you to think about just a very short brief definition of what you believe change management to be. And Lynn, you can't just say the management of change. You need to go a bit more broader than that.
Oh dear. I was just trying to think of it in a different word.
As soon as I said that, I could hear the backspace clicking quickly.
Okay. Where's it going to type?
You can just find a space anywhere on the screen, really.
Okay. I think accept.
Okay, so a couple are still typing there. I can see, right. Whoops. Okay, to enable and assist colleagues to be able to accept and develop through change. Interesting use of the word accept there. Who was that? Was that you, Kira?
No, that's me.
Lynn.
That was Lynn, right. So what was your thinking behind using the word accept?
Because some people find it very difficult to accept change. And, you know, I'll go to the Kubler-Ross curve in how people go through various stages of accepting change.
Yep. Okay, good. And we will be touching on that one again today, but I'm going to explore a few others for you as well, which might help broaden that out a little bit. Okay, so Tracy, you said navigating the unknown future or planned future. Yep, great. Prepare and support teams through organisational change. I think, you know, they're all on the money. I mean, in its most simplistic sense, it's just the management and development of change throughout a business and or organisation. You notice I've used the word development. I think someone else used that word as well. It was you, Lynn. Yeah. Use the word development of change throughout that period. And I think in one of the introduction, I think it was either Kira or Lynn mentioned about your operations director saying that there's always change, and there is. And I think to create a culture change is essentially about getting people understanding that it is always changing. In fact, I had a boss that used to use the term "keep the discontent hot," which I thought was probably a little bit harsh, but its basic premise was that never let people get too comfortable, because then they become complacent and then they don't progress forward, and it makes them less resistant or more resistant to change down the line. So I think that's, you know, maybe soften that a little bit so that keep the discontent hot, but it's a great way to keep people on their toes. You know, I know that I'm by far my most productive when I'm tossed in the deep end and have to swim for my life rather than, you know, paddling in the shallow end. And I think most people, not everybody, but most people probably, you know, would respond more favorably that way. Okay, very good. Right. Okay, change management. So I'm just going to ask you a quick question. You know, in the case of NHS, they're always doing change management projects. I spent some time there a few years ago, and you know, it just seemed every single project seemed to be sort of change management based, and it was just a revolving door, and it was quite challenging. By the time they got to some sort of decision, and you'll know this much better than I, Tracy, but by the time they got to a decision 6 months down the line, the goalpost had changed again, and you went all the way back to the start, and the process begins again, and then you get this treadmill of nothing actually happening. Just to ask a question, what percentage of change management projects fail around the world, do you think? Just put it in the, just to give us a figure.
80%, I reckon.
80%?
Yeah, I imagine it's quite high.
Yeah.
I'd put it at maybe like 75.
Yeah. According to the Harvard Business Review, it's 70% of change initiatives fail. So that's a significant figure, isn't it? To think, well, why bother if you're getting those sort of numbers? So we'll look at it in a moment as to why that is. What are some of the reasons why it's so difficult? So I'll have a look at that shortly. Right. So the first question I want to ask you: why is it so important? Why is change so important?
Oh, are we writing these down?
You can just say this audio if you like. Just come off mute.
Oh, right. Okay. And for progress.
Progress. Okay. Can you do it without it?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, innovation. It's always changing, so you have to develop and change as that develops and changes.
I think the world changes, the markets change. I mean, just looking at what happened throughout 2020 is a clear example of change.
It's almost like, sorry, I was just going to say, it's almost like sometimes with change, it's a responsive need to the environment around you. So actually, because everything changes around you, it's then business-wise, you're perpetuating a change to keep up or forecasting a change to keep up.
Yeah. Hey, it's a good point, because I think in most cases, most organisations are actually reactive more so than proactive when it comes to change, because how can you possibly predict the future? I think you only ever make decisions based on the information that you have to hand, don't you? So I think I would agree it is about innovation and progression, adapting to market changes or social changes, as you quite rightly said, Kira. I think probably in my lifetime, I don't think there's been as many social changes that I've seen in such a short space of time in the last 12, 18 months. It's been quite significant. I was just on a course the other day around diversity and inclusion, and it was just astonishing, some of the conversations and some of how people have really been challenged, including myself, around how you view and see things. So I think that's a really good. I don't think always change is not always positive, by the way. I think sometimes change can necessarily have an adverse effect, certainly in an organisation. I think only recently, you look at, I don't know if you saw Burger King recently changed their logo. Did anyone see that?
No.
Yeah.
Anyone know what they changed it to?
No.
No, I see.
Was it a burger?
Yeah.
I feel like I could picture the colours. Is it like a burger bun type? Yeah.
That's the one, which was their exact logo they had pre-1999 or something, which they'd had for 30 years. So if you've seen their sort of more recent ones of the last 15, 20 years, it's got a blue slash around the outside of it, which most people have said, well, I've never eaten a burger with anything blue on it, so I think, and they've actually gone back to their old logo, or Co-op did it a few years ago as well, didn't they? So, trying to get in touch with that sort of, they didn't see the results from it, so they've actually gone back to something more familiar. Be interested to see whether that actually works or not. Okay, good. Yeah, so I think it's keep moving things forward, increases motivation. I think in a lot of cases, I think people get stale and complacent, particularly if you are a performer. I think it's quite difficult if things stay the same too often. People will often tell you they like things to stay the same, but I'm not sure how real that is as far as some sort of progression. All right, so what are some of the, and again, just using audio for these three questions, what might the impact be of changes? You can think of this from a positive and or negative aspect. And again, just feel free to jump in.
Some people will be resistant to it.
Yes.
Being awkward. And then likewise, you'll have people that will thoroughly embrace it.
Why do you think there's a difference between the two, Lynn? Why do some people embrace and other people don't?
Some people literally just do not like change.
Why is that?
They're frightened of it because they don't know what it means for them.
Yeah.
I think as well with change, I think we're kind of programmed to expect the worst from it. We're almost programmed to think that all change comes with risk. And I think even with that, the Kubler-Ross curve, that's kind of demonstrates that already. You're looking at that and you're expecting people to not be able to deal with it, and then to go into this level of, struggling with it and not being able to accept it. Yeah. And I think humans, I think we're almost programmed to be a bit skeptical over change, rather than looking at it as well why does it have to be something that we concern ourselves with? We're always like, oh, you have to prepare for change, well, in a negative way, really. And I think that's probably why most people don't like it, is because that's how it's perceived.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think there is a little bit of a stigma attached to it. You think back to something we said earlier in the session, was that things always change, yet so many people remain uncomfortable with it. So why is that? Is that a human reaction, or is that something a culture that's been created around it, especially in organisations? I think at the end of the day, I think most people are concerned about their own safety more often than not. So if they're painted into a corner, if you think if things are going to change, then what's going to happen to my job? Will I keep it? If I can't keep my job, then I can't pay the mortgage. If I can't pay the mortgage, and so on and so on and so on. So this knock-on effect can occur as a result of that change. Any positives? Positive impacts?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we touched on that progress side of it, I think that's one of the main positives that comes out of change, is often progress, and that, or even if it's not necessarily progress, it's still a learning, it's still an experience that you can then take away. Yeah, I'd say that's one of the main positives for any change.
Yeah,
I think you can. I was just going to say, I think you can get an aligned vision through change. You can really culture through change. Often, when we were sort of talking about the negative side, most people kind of their heckles come up to change because it's about what it means to them. I think often when change is going on, the instinctive response is, what does this mean to me? How will this impact on me?
Yeah, I think that's right. And what's interesting, when organizations go through change, once you get through the other side and you're all set up and running again, most people are pretty comfortable with it. So the challenge as a leader is to start them at that point and work backwards rather than start from the points of change. I think Lynn and Kira, you would have heard me always talk about what's the end game and work backwards, and I think that applies here. What does it look like on the other side? What is our team going to look like? In your case, Tracy, what are we going to look like in 2 years' time, and start there so they can start to visualize what the end project is, because which once they get there, they're usually okay. So, and it's usually because they can't see it. So give them that sort of visual and get them involved. And I'll touch in a moment is get them involved in the project as well, so they can start to see what it visualizes and feel more comfortable with it. In most cases, it is that uncertainty. I don't know what's happening. What's going to happen to me? You touched on that, Tracy. Was one of my favorite acronyms is WIFM. What's in it for me? At the end of the day, most people ask themselves that question in any sort of change. What is this going to mean to me? Okay, very good. So what are some of the challenges, potential challenges that you might face? You talked about resistance, Lynn. What else?
People just leave.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah.
It's really difficult. If you don't mind, Tim, if I can just use an example, a company that I used to work with, we went through a massive change to the point that the company was literally turned on its head, and okay, we're going to completely change the way that we work. And so there's 45 people there thinking, we've been doing this and it's been successful, why are we changing? And it was literally a case of, we don't like it, it doesn't work for me, we don't even want to try to accept it, so that's it, we're just going to, and loads of people left. I have to say I stayed, but loads of people did but loads of people, because they weren't prepared to come outside the scenario and look in from the outside, and everything changes all the time. The environment changes, your values change, the focus changes, and ultimately that means culture. But for that particular company, it was so massive, but the people that stayed actually ended up much more settled, safe and fulfilled, but they just were so resistant to the fact that if it's going to affect me, then I don't want to even be there. I'm just not prepared to accept it, which is hard.
Was it the change itself or the implementation of the change, do you think, people left?
Think it was the change. If I look back, it was the change itself that was just so terrifying to people that had been there for a long time and were particularly senior people, and so the case was then okay. Well, why is the case? So what you actually found was that the majority of the management, the leaders stayed, the heads of department stayed, and what they did was they obviously the shake up, if you like, which is what it's always called. The shake up was a positive thing. When you actually look back on it, it was a very positive thing, but it was getting the leaders and the people that need to lead it forward motivated to be able to then deliver the message.
Yeah, I think this is a bit of a combination of the both, isn't it? I mean, I think I left an organization for the constant change. When I first started in a bank, I worked there for 12 years and started out as a service-driven environment. A few years later, they started to introduce sales as a concept within the business. Eventually, it became service and sales. Over a few years, it became sales and service, and then eventually it was just sales and less so on service. At which point, I thought this isn't right for me. Doesn't fit my value system at this particular point in time. I went and did something else. So I think there's lots of reasons. Some of the challenges, you've got challenges that can be market challenges as well. I think businesses at the moment trying to go through change is very, very difficult. I know in my case, 10 months ago, I had to completely change my business model on what I had been doing in the past. I had to completely think about how am I going to do this? How am I going to move forward with this? And going through that change was quite difficult, particularly in my case, because on my own, I didn't have the ability to collaborate with anybody else. I had to try and work it out and think, how am I going to move this forward? How am I going to still survive this massive change? So there is lots of difference. There's economic, there can be individual people themselves. If you're an organization that's never been through change and then trying to change, that's incredibly difficult. It's in some cases like the NHS, you've probably got potentially go the other way. There's so much change, people don't buy into it because of the fact that, last time they said they were going to change this, and 2 years later, changed it again. So we did some work with a retailer a few years ago, and they'd had 4 CEOs in 4 years. And we came in with a new CEO and said, right, this is the way I'm going to do it. I want to do massive amounts of training and development on the back of it. So we then rolled it out across the country, and the resistance, probably I would say a good third of them struggled to buy into the training, because their view was there's no point in me learning this, because in 12 months time we'll have another CEO with another view, with another vision. So what's the point of me embracing and taking this on, which was a tough objection to overcome. So there's lots of different challenges. All right, we're going to have a look at in a moment. So I'm just going to put up a poll for you. These are some of the reasons for failure. So I just want you to think about or answer which one you think is the most common reason for failure from a leader's point of view. So this is from a business leader's point of view. So you should see the poll come up shortly. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just answer what you think the most main reasons organizations fail, according to business leaders. Okay, so we've got 2 more, just waiting on 2 more. Everyone can see that okay? Yeah, 1 more.
Ooh.
Who's stuck?
Me, I'm just deciding.
Okay, right, so I'm just going to share those results. So we had 3 people said a lack of effective communication, and 1 said poor management skills. So I'm just going to share a graph here, which you should be able to see. Everyone can see that okay? So according to a study that was done by PMI, this was what business leaders said. 32% poor project management skills, unfamiliar scope, effective communication. Now, interestingly enough, if we were to ask the employees of those companies why they thought effective change in place, what do you think they would have said?
Communication.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting that 3 of you said it was a lack of effective communication, but from the business point of view, from the business leader, they didn't see that, because they probably believed they communicated it effectively, whereas opposed to who are they blaming in the process?
Yeah.
Poor project management skills. Yeah, poor project management skills.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at this, there's a really interesting study. Because if you look at those 5 answers, what's missing from each of those five answers? What's the most important part of change? Who is the most important part of change?
People.
People. yet it's not mentioned in that study, which is why I shared it, because I thought this is showing it from a business leader's point of view, fairly senior, I suspect, as opposed to how an employee might view it very, very differently, which is part of the problem, isn't it? So if you speak to business, well, it didn't work because people didn't do their jobs properly. We didn't have the right people. They were prepared for the change. We didn't have the skills to roll it out, blah, 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 as opposed to, is there any sort of internal introspective viewpoint to say, well, actually, what did we do well in the process? And more often than not, it may come down to a lack of effective communication. Any thoughts on that?
I think, I guess probably for me, I probably looked at it as the lack of effective communication as a bit of a catch-all, because usually it's because I would say things like your defined objectives and your vision, that they might all be there, but it's about how they're communicated. I'd maybe come at it as that one being the people one. I mean, as you'll know, probably NHS absolutely love a Prince 2 qualification. It's unbelievable. They're obsessed with project management, and actually it's had its day, because it really is more around leadership, and I think the conversation is now definitely, as we move into this new structure, people led. I would challenge then, have we got the right skill set? I think it comes back to challenges. I don't know that we've got the right skill set in terms of training development in the leadership levels to be able to implement such a large change, Tim.
Well, I happen to know a really good company that specialises in leadership training. So, okay. So, look, I think that's a really good point and observation around that. I think, you're right. I think there is a greater emphasis on leadership rather than more sort of task-related projects. I'm going to share 5 tips with you that I got from a source from Robert Half, which I thought, it summed up how I view it, and just to share, I guess, a little bit. Okay, the first one is communication, which we touched on often, but be strategic. I think there's a real balance, and that's the word that comes to mind when I think of communication. If you are communicating from a business leader's point of view, communicating a massive change, there's only so much information that you can then share. So in the case of Lynn and Sarah, I know you guys are on the management team. There's information that you get that comes down from above, and then you've got to then decipher what needs to be communicated. There's only so much that can be communicated, but by the same token, you have to strike a right balance, because you think of it from the employee's point of view. Now, most people, particularly in an organisation, say like Silmid, given the size, will often know something's happening. They can sense and feel that something's changing. They know there's talks going on, and in your building you've got glass walls. I've only got to walk past and see you people in there, and I'll know that something's happening. People can feel it and sense it. The stress levels increase. So you've got to find that balance between being open and transparent, but not communicating too much. And I think, as I said, I think the balance is right. I would say the most important part, and I see this in a lot of organizations that are lacking, is a communication strategy around not only project management, but change management as well. So what does a good communication strategy look like? I think it might have been you, Kira. We had some conversations around this a while ago, or maybe it was Faye, I can't remember. But
yeah, it was me and Faye.
Yeah, so to actually put together an action plan. So your communication is, because it's a pretty broad term, isn't it, communication? So what exactly are you communicating? Why are you communicating? Who are you communicating to? And then how are you actually going to be communicating, by what delivery mechanism? And finally, when are you going to do it? So I think if you are, in your case, Tracy, you may want to, and it doesn't have to be a 40-page document. It's only got to be an action plan with 3 or 4 pages on it, saying, well, these are the 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 things I'm going to communicate. Who's going to get that communication? How are they going to receive it? Is it going to be an email? Am I going to put them on a webinar? I'm going to make a document for whatever, and think strategically about how you're going to do that and when you're actually going to do it, particularly with change, because change takes place over a period of time, as opposed to 1 week. It might be a 6-month, a 12-month project you've actually got that you're actually implementing change. So I've started with communication. I think that's important. But the word to remember there is balance. Okay, acknowledge employees' feelings. I think that's a really, really important one. I would say probably from an employee's point of view, the most significant change I went through was being made redundant. It's the only time it had ever happened in my career. And it's probably the thing I found the most difficult, particularly with the HR departments. It felt like there was a lack of understanding of what I'm going through here. And in my case, it was even made even more difficult because not only me being made redundant, my team are being made redundant. There was still an expectation that I needed to lead and manage them through the change, when I really just wanted to throw my toys out the pram. So I think that sometimes it's really important to understand that you may not necessarily be able to solve all their problems, but I think often just being heard and having that opportunity to vent or to get it off the chest and be heard, I think is really important around acknowledging their feelings. So have that level of understanding and empathy. Okay, the third one is invite employees to help the problem. And I think you've got an opportunity in your case, Tracy, because the strategic change has already taken place. Your role is to implement it. So, you still need to lead it and be the decision maker, but there's value in people in collaborating with your team and getting their input. The reason why I say that is where appropriate, of course. You wouldn't give them ownership of what you're going to do, but you may give them ownership of how you're going to do it. I'm a big believer the more people get involved and come up with answers, the more likely to take ownership of it if it was theirs, as opposed to being told. So going back to that sort of coaching principle. So invite them into the space, invite them to deal, so to speak, I think is a great way to get more involvement in it. And I think once that happens and you've shown a level of empathy and understanding as a leader, you're more likely to get buy-in when things don't quite go the way they want, because they'll understand your point of view and position a little bit more. Okay, follow through, but follow through, be flexible. I would say this is probably my greatest challenge with change. It's very easy when you get so much objection or resistance to then default back to what you were doing in the past, but you're going to just keep following through and see it through. What do you think I mean by being flexible? I'm just opening that up to the group.
Don't be rigid with doing it. See other people's point of views.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sort of taking a real sense of points 2 and 3.
Yeah.
If you're going to go out and ask people, that it's almost insulting that you're not going to take some of that back and then influence the outcome from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's that flexibility in the approach of the change, but also the flexibility of how you're actually managing it with your people as well. And just for your benefit, Lynn, avoid using the words. Which 4 words should you avoid? Come on. No, don't, won't, or can't.
Yeah.
Okay. They're the quickest way to eliminate options. So I think always use more sort of flexible language. Great. And the 5th one is celebrate success. And I think that's really important, that they see the benefits and the rewards as it's actually happening. Any questions on that before I go into the models?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to share some of the 5 of the more common models that are used in change management. There are more, and I've tried to get a selection that it's a combination of some that are employee focused, some that are business focused, some that are more contemporary, and some that are a bit older. So as you're going through, as we're going through them, and I've only got 20 minutes, so I'll be only spending a short amount on each. We were running a course in a few weeks, so that's what the course is going to do. It's going to explore more about what the models are and actual more application, to give you an opportunity to do that if you wanted to go on the course. But today I'm just going to give you a short overview, and I want you to think about which one is it? Is it employee or is it business? And also think about which one do you think that you might be able to use back in your business that's going to be appropriate. So in your case, Tracy, you've got something quite specific. Lynn and Kira is a little bit more broader about how you're managing the changes. Nothing specific at the moment other than the current climate. Okay, so the first one, and please let me know if, let me ask you, is there anything you're aware of? I know you've mentioned Kubler-Ross, and we'll be touching on that one in a moment. Is there any other change management models you're aware of?
There will be, but my mind's gone blank.
Yeah.
There will be, I'm sure.
I think you did an MBA, didn't you, Tracy? So I'd be shocked if you haven't seen some of these in there. I think the purpose of today is just to give you a bit of a taste of it. As I said, I want you to think about where the focus is on each of the models. So the first one is called Kotter's model, Kubler-Ross, which you've touched on already, McKinsey's 7S, which I know
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, I've definitely shared that with Faye. You might have been in that same conversation, Kira. McKinsey's 7S, Lewin's model, which I think we touched on, Kira and Lynn, very early on, but very briefly. We're touching on that one as well. And then the final one is there, which is probably becoming a bit more popular is ADKAR, which is an acronym, obviously. Right. So Kotters. Has anyone heard of Kotters?
Yeah.
Yep. What do you know about it?
Do you know what?
Gone blank.
Blank, yeah, big time. And you're
Okay.
right to call me out as well, Tim, because obviously I did absolutely do a whole module.
Yeah, you would have. I'd be surprised if you didn't cover it. And I mean, how do you remember these sort of things unless you actually use them back in the workplace? So what you'll find, so this is the model for Kotters. It starts off with about creating urgency. And as I said, I'm going to breeze through these quite quickly for the purpose of today. It's creating urgency. And I think that's probably the most primal and relevant part, is just to get that level of urgency. Right, this is what we're going to do. We've got a new product, or we're going to be moving to a new location, or whatever the case may be. Get some urgency. We're going to do it by this day. So build teams and coalitions around it. Create some sort of form strategy. You see here that then moves on to enlist communications. You can see this is a very sort of project driven in some ways, but this enlist communications, going back to that communication plan, enable the employees to get their engagement, their involvement. What do they think? How can they be involved? Get some quick wins, your low hanging fruit. That's probably a big part of Kotters' model, is generating those quick wins. And the reason for that is so that people can say, oh, it's working. I can see this is actually something's happening, and there are some reward and benefits from it, rather than just focusing purely on the long-term goals. Because remember, it's just strategy is linked to your level of leadership and or expertise in the business. So your lowest level could probably think maybe a month ahead. You sort of, lower management might be 3 months, middle management 6 to 12, and then your senior people, 2 years and beyond. So bear that in mind when you are thinking about those quick wins. Get them in quickly. Then it's about sustaining those wins and gains, and then instituting those changes. So one of the downsides of Kotters' model, there's a lot of steps to it, as you can see, which is probably why you don't remember it, Tracy, because you've got to remember 8 things rather than others. For what I've just described, is there any sort of feel towards it? Is it more business, or is it employee based?
Business.
Employee, I was going to say. Yeah,
there's a little bit of business, so it's probably a bit more employee focused, because it's got a lot around that. It's not so much at the beginning. You're quite right, Lynn. It's around there's a little bit around here, sort of 1, 2, and 3, the strategy of this business, but the rest is about getting people engaged. So creating urgency is employee driven, communicating to employees, enabling them, getting them involved, showing the rewards is a bit more employee driven. Okay, so the interesting a couple of things about the Kotters model is, as you can see, it's preparing for change rather than the implementation, which, to your point, Lynn, is a little bit more business strategy. It's more about the employee experience, what they're going throughout the process. And you can see literally every stage of that process, the employees will be involved. And then the last piece is around creating a work community, certainly the building the teams and coalitions and the communications and getting your employees involved. As I said, I'm just a real whistle stop tour through this. But please, if you've got any questions, jump in. Is there anything questions before I move on to the next one?
No.
Okay. The second one, which you certainly Lynn and Kira have already referenced and are familiar with, is the Kubler-Ross model. Tracy, are you familiar with this one?
No, I don't think I am.
Given that you're in the NHS, I'm shocked. Given that this is actually the original model was built around grief, dealing with grief. And you can see that there's two sides to it, energy and integration. And I know that Lynn and Kira have adopted this quite a bit in your organisation. And it's essentially when someone's going through a massive change, there's that initial shock and denial. It's not happening. I don't believe it. In some cases, you then, as you can see, the curve of integration and motivation starts to decrease into anger in some cases, start to bargain. And if you might want to be thinking about, if you have not seen this before, Tracy, is think about a situation in your life, either through work or at home or something like that, where you've gone through some sort of massive change or real difficult period. You'll probably be able to identify some of these steps on the process. So for me, it was redundancy. I literally went through this step by step. There was that shock and denial. I can't believe it. Don't they value me? Blah, blah, blah. Then it was angry. I was angry with people. Why are they staying and not me? Surely I'm more valuable than them. And then I can remember putting together a 10-point PowerPoint slide to send to my boss of what I think we could do moving forward. So I went into the bargaining phase, and then I realized I was going, and there was that level of depression, and the acceptance instantly took me about a year, I would say. and it was only a very direct conversation from my lovely wife that got me back on track. You know, you need to have a good hard look at yourself sort of conversation. It wasn't quite as blunt as that, and there was no throwing of objects or anything in that particular example as in the past. But yes, then there's that level of acceptance. So this is a great model. What's important to remember about this is that everybody goes through this. Most people will go through it, and some people say, "Oh no, I don't go through it," but more often than not, they just may go through it quicker. But more often than not, they may go through that process. So if you are going through a change like your project, Tracy, what you'll need to be considering where this could be valuable is where your people are on that particular model, because they may all be at different phases and different places, and in some cases they might regress. Particularly if there's a second change that comes, because what if there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 changes are going and people are still on this journey? So this is a great model to be able to help employees through. With this one, what do you think, employee or business?
Yeah, employee.
Yeah, this is definitely 100% employee, no doubt about that. And great way for help with understanding and empathy to use this particular model with your people and potentially show them this. Talk them through it. You know, it's important, not as with most models or theories, it's not pigeonhole people, but you can sort of get an idea and help people to understand that this is a normal process as opposed to feeling that uncertainty we talked about. Okay, the third one, focus on employees, better understanding, better community. The next one is the McKinsey's 7S model. Okay, personally, this is one I like a lot, particularly for a larger sort of, what's good about this is it covers all areas of change. Now, in your case, Tracy, the change, this exercise has probably already been done, but what's useful from your point of view, understand what's happened in each of these areas. So if you look at the list there, so the shared values combines them all, and I built this animation image myself. You wouldn't believe how long it took me to get those lines all together in that to get perfectly and in sync. But as you know, I love my animations, but I was going to animate each one. I thought I don't have 2 hours, so I had to just put it as one image. But if you think about it, you've got shared values that brings it all together. Structure, so organizational structure, the systems, the IT that you're using, the style, so that's your culture and how the personality of your business, staff, your employees, skills, your capability, and then your strategy and vision. If you think about that, they cover literally everything. So the benefits of the McKinsey model, as I said, is a focus on all areas of the business. There's nothing that can't fall under one of those categories. One of the other benefits is there's less on process, more on business impact. So it's less about workflow and process, and it's very, very strategy focused, which is why I use it so much, particularly in the consultancy phase of any project and or change management. Very popular in organizational development in particular, hence why Kira, yourself and Faye, we looked at this particular model, and I know that you guys have sort of applied some of this, maybe not directly, but some of it within your business. Okay, business or employee?
Business.
Yeah, absolutely business. That's a nice easy one. Okay, the next one is Lewin's model. This is a very, very simple one.
I don't remember this one.
Don't remember one? I know we touched on it very, very briefly. I should point out, by the way, that the first two, the Kubler-Rotter was developed in the 60s. The first one, Kotter's, was developed in the 80s. The last one we just touched on, McKinsey's, was developed in the 80s. Now, this one's the oldest of the ones I'm sharing today. So this was developed in the 20s and 30s by a gentleman by the name of Lewin. So this just talks in a very simplistic sense about unfreezing, what's the current status quo, what's currently happening at the moment, and understanding that and unfreezing that, so getting people prepared for the change. Then the actual change takes place, identified by the precipitation of the drops, and then they understand the change, and then you rock it back into sorry, that should say freeze, by the way, not unfreeze again. We have a perpetual cycle of never actually anything happening. That should say freeze. So and then you go back to the start. So it's a very simplistic model. The benefits are, as you can see, it's very simple and easy to follow. Your people also understand that as well. So, and a better understanding of organizational change, where, and one of the things you can do is there's nothing to stop you from using a combination of the models, by the way, particularly if one's more business focused and one's more employee focused. This one is more about the organizational change of a business. So where's the business at the moment? Well, we're currently, do you remember that scenario we did, Lynn and Kira, with the company that sold I think it was like drills, and they were almost going out of business. And then they decided, because they were spending so much money manufacturing and sending stuff over from China, they changed their business model to go, well, actually, we're going to lease the products instead. We'll buy them and lease them. That's a really good example where the Lewins model can work quite well. Let's unfreeze it. The model's not currently working. Our overheads are far too high. How can we unfreeze that? Well, we can do it by taking away the pain of the overheads and change our business model. The change was, okay, we're no longer manufacturing, which would have meant getting rid of an entire function of the business. It then would have required your salespeople to have completely new strategies and massive changes across all areas of the business. And that's where McKinsey's might come in. And then the next bit is, okay, we've now got a new model. We've got a new people. We're going to lock it in and freeze it and we move forward. So that's a really good example of where Lewins might work. Thoughts, business or employee?
Business.
Yeah, this one's definitely more business. It's the bigger picture, the arc. Okay, and the last one, as I said, this was the most contemporary. This was developed in around 96, I think, which is called ADKAR. Anyone heard of this one?
I haven't heard of it, no.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I certainly haven't touched on it in our sessions that we did. But as I said, it's become a bit more common. This one is great for gap analysis. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So what it talks a little bit about is it has, as you can see, an awareness. So that's the awareness being the need. What is the need for the change? And now this is right across the business, from the actual business itself to the people within it. The desire to be part of the change, getting that desire from your people. Then there's the knowledge. What capability do we have and how do we actually do it? To be able to effectively manage the change, and that ties in with the ability as well. So that this is more around the implementation of the change, and then there's that reinforcement. So almost the freezing bit again, around to make sure that it sticks and keeps it going. So this one's a little bit more trickier. Do you think it's business or employee?
Employee.
Yeah, I think employee.
It's actually a bit of both. It's actually probably why it's become a bit more popular, because it has a bit more about the awareness, the need for the change, which is a business requirement, and then there's communicating that effectively to your people for the need for the change. So it is actually a little bit of a both. And you could go into this one a lot more. In fact, you could go into each of them. I think what I would say, just give 3 tips there. So focus on both employee identification and evaluation of whether it's working or not as well. So there's that ability to be able to, that's one of the benefits of gap analysis. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? So there's that sort of long-term approach to it as well, which is very business as well. So they're 5 that I've shown very, very quickly. And I granted it's only a short view of each. And I think the thing to take away here is that they you can use them in combination. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, particularly if you're thinking, well, the business is already done, I just need to focus on the employees, or a little bit of both. In fact, you could probably filter all 5 if you had the time and the resources to be able to do it. I'm just going to be finishing off shortly. Any thoughts on those models? Anything that jumped out of that you liked, just didn't like, out of favour towards one or another?
I definitely wasn't keen on the Lewins.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
It kind of feels like it misses out too much. I think it almost I think for something that can be quite complicated and almost you need to break it down into those sections to make it manageable, I think Lewins kind of just doesn't do that at all. It almost oversimplifies it in a way that you're not able to break it down and go through those steps that are needed to be able to manage that change.
I think it could be a good place.
That makes sense.
It does. I think it could be a good place to start, though. You could start there and then park it and then start to use one of the other models to adapt from what you've uncovered from that. So it's a really simple way. So what do we need to unfreeze? What do we need to change? And what do we need to lock back in? And so it breaks the steps down really easily, but I don't think you could just use it in isolation, I would agree. Any other thoughts?
I quite like that there was a couple of new ones in there, Tim, for me. The ADKAR one, I wasn't aware of that, and actually you know, like we touched on, we're absolutely entrenched in change stuff, and it tends to default back to the Cotters model. So it's quite nice to know there's some other employee focused ones, because that's obviously our overall factor. More often than not, there's not a lot of business focus. There's a good one that's a hybrid of the two, really.
Yeah, and I think that's what, you know, the purpose of these models is to find the one that's right for you, and it could be a combination. You may even end up developing your own model that actually works for your business. Okay, I think to just sort of wrap that up, and this is often focused on this particular webinar on business and employees, and I think that the success of any change within an organization is where those two parties' narratives remain the same, because more often than not, you've got the business trying to do one thing and the employee. And so I'm going to repeat that again, is that the narrative, the greater chance you have of successful change is where the narratives of the two parties are in line or parallel with each other. If they're not, that's when you get things like Sarah mentioned before about people leaving the business or unhappy or going off with stress and things like that, is to have that narrative. So bear in mind, because there's always two narratives taking place, the businesses and yours. You know, if you think back to my example about leaving the bank, that's where my narrative started to stray from theirs. So this isn't right for me anymore. So that to manage a successful change is to have those two narratives in line with each other. I'm just going to finish off with this quote: people don't resist change, they resist changes to their continued connotation of the narrative. Continuity, sorry, of their narrative. So I think that's probably the sort of key message that I've put with this session today, is to think about that's where some of the resistance comes in, is they don't resist change, they resist the change of their narrative. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I actually think that McKinsey model probably works best in line with that, because I think that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's making sure that all of those S's are aligned.
Yeah.
I think that works quite well with that particular phrase.
I think that's a great point, Kira, because you think in the middle of the model is the shared values,
Yeah.
which brings it all together. I think if you took that shared value piece out, it'd be a pretty hollow model. That's what brings it all together. And you know, I think when I first saw that model, it was actually 8 steps, and it was part of one of the 8s, but didn't work as it's on its isolation. It was only when I saw it in the middle, thought it works, it connects. Okay, so just to finish off before I get some feedback from you guys, if you can, we're running a course on this, Driving and Managing Change, starting in February. It's virtual, so there's 4 sessions, 3 hours each over 4 weeks. And what we'll do in the session is to explore what we covered today. So actually break down more into the models and give you an opportunity to have case studies and practice it and actually apply them rather than just talk about them theoretically. Because you've come on the webinar today, there's a discount for that. So if you guys are interested, and that implies to anyone else that you bring in from your business and or otherwise for the program. So I'll open it up to you guys, just to be good to get some feedback, what your thoughts were about the session.
I enjoyed it. It's nice to have a catch up, and it's also nice to see what changes have occurred since we last spoke. Like that ad car, I do quite like that. So, and it sort of like brings everything back to the forefront.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I thought it was a good summary. I think it's always good to remind yourself of some of those tools that you can use, and almost sometimes I think it's a bit of a sanity check as well. Sometimes these kinds of discussions definitely helps to, I suppose, re-embed some of those learnings that we've already had.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thanks, Kira. Tracy, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, to be honest, as I've done a lot of kind of this stuff, so it was a good refresher, but nice to see something new as well. And what I would say is really nice to kind of join non sort of public sector colleagues. Yes. I do think we were a set of tinks for just keeping ourselves to ourselves, to be honest. So yeah, a really good taster session. And I just I'll maybe have a conversation with you at a different time, because I think I've probably got a couple of connections that I could maybe stitch you into, where we're kind of coordinating our wider development for the health sector. That I just think it's worth tapping and trying, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Sarah, is anything you wanted to add?
It was lovely to get an external perspective on what we do, really, and to hear sort of, you know, how the world is changing from, you know, other people, and I think that the thing is that talking to everybody at the moment, what I would sort of endorse is that everybody is changing, and 2020 has made everybody look at their organization, their effectiveness, their efficiency, and their longer term sort of objectives to you know, it isn't uncommon. Your pains are not uncommon, but it is an evolution process, and it is a case of addressing and moving forward. And you know, change is good, change is positive, and I don't think it's getting that message across is quite hard, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, thank you so much for joining. We're doing a webinar every month. So the next month is managing mindset. So another very topical one at the moment. So if you wanted to join that, it'll be on the website, or I'll be doing some advertising on LinkedIn and so forth. So feel free to join those sessions. Like I said, we one every month, every year. Throughout the year, that we'll be running these sessions. So thank you so much for joining. It's lovely to see some familiar faces again, although Sarah, Lynn and Kira failed to show their faces, but that's okay. Tracy, I appreciate you hanging in there for the whole hour on video. Very brave. But look, thanks so much, and I'll no doubt speak to all of you at some point in the future.